social media and everything starting in about October through January, there's holidays galore and people have all these expectations, but if you're miserable, a lot of people just end up dreading this time of year, which it is beautiful outside and there's no reason to have to dread it every single year.
I think a lot of it comes down to that external pressure of gift giving and the money on travel and things like that. Because most people, I think the average American doesn't even have $500 in savings. So imagine feeling like you need to spend hundreds of dollars. And now tickets cost thousands. So there's that sense of buyer's remorse in January and just like a letdown. And it's also like a lot of buildup and then excitement and travel and chaos and then just like getting back to regular life, that transition.
Yeah, I think it's normally people are in routines, but getting thrown out of your routine and just feeling completely out of control, like for the holidays, things start to add up really quickly. All of a sudden, you have a family member that maybe wants to eat something special or is an extra person you have to get a gift for. And then if you're staying at their house, you're waking up at a different time, and it can just feel like everything exponentially multiplies in stress.
Yeah, it's like just planning to take a flight sometimes can be just like a bunch of steps to even get to that point. And by the time you get to that house that you're visiting, you're probably somewhat exhausted. And then you don't have all your normal things that you travel or the things that you travel with are limited. So you get there and you just kind of feel out of your element as well, especially at like an in-laws house, like if you're traveling with a partner which I guess is typically the case, or if people are coming into your home, that can also feel,
Mhm.
especially if it's a lot of people, that can also feel like an invasion a little bit.
In the news, road rage incidents are up just because of all the pressures of society. So driving somewhere even and then having a certain level of anxiety when you show up at the house because maybe it wasn't a great drive, and then all of a sudden there's all this food that you don't normally eat on a regular basis, so it's impacting your digestion,
Like,
staying up super late. So even if you're not drinking, you get that like fatigue, almost hungover feeling. It just all maybe during the year you meditate, you exercise, you manage it, but it just is another step leading to giving that anxiety really revved up.
yeah, I think it's just you're thrown off completely, like you said, of your routines and mentally, if you're not the kind of person that overeats, but then it's like, well, it's Thanksgiving, we all overeat, and then watch football. It's like, well, you don't actually have to do that if that's not helpful for you. Like I choose not to do that, for example. I just eat normal. We
Yeah.
don't have to do the things that everybody else tells us that we have to do.
Yeah, I don't think there's ever been a time that I've said, "Oh my god, I wish I ate more." You only really say, "I wish I ate less." So there's nothing I've regretted not eating. I think that's something to keep in mind. Only eat what you wanna eat. If you're not gonna enjoy it,
Yeah.
then why worry about it?
Yeah, I do think it's a good time for emetophobes to challenge their thinking and to challenge themselves with like eating a little bit more, especially when you have a beautiful spread in front of you, and foods that might be delicacies or someone else cooked. It is challenging and a pain point, but it's also a really good time to test yourself and to test your growth. Especially when somebody else is preparing your food. Maybe they've been exposed. Maybe they've been holding all the sick kids. Maybe, you don't know if they've washed their hands, things like that. So it's a good time to just eat the unknown food that you didn't prepare.
Yeah, that is true. I would definitely say to try everything, but if you don't like something, don't force yourself to eat it. Like, I know I used to refuse to eat shrimp, and I made some this year and they were delicious.
Oh, okay. Yeah, try new things too. I think part
Yeah.
of being thrivey is to allow yourself to break out of the mold, whether it's socially or trying new foods and things like that.
Yeah. I think a main thing I know for me, I don't know if this happened to you when you had emetophobia, is I didn't know if I didn't like a food or if I was afraid to try it. So I wouldn't eat certain things because in my mind, thought that they were gonna make me sick. Like shrimp, I thought when I had emetophobia that it was gonna make me sick for some reason. I didn't have
Mm,
any research or anything, but
yeah.
trying it, I actually liked it. So, if you genuinely don't like a food, don't eat it. It's not worth it. But if it's because you're scared you're gonna get sick and you might like it, challenge yourself. Try a
Yeah.
little bit.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think you should always ask yourself the question, where's this coming from? Is this coming from a place of fear or preference?
Yeah.
I don't know if I did that so much. I just avoided certain things, but I still won't eat those things. But it's mostly because I have no interest. Like oysters, I'm really just not interested in that.
Yeah. I can't say I've ever had an oyster because it just not because of fear of sick, but from what I've heard people describe the textures, it doesn't sound like something I'm interested in trying.
I felt that way about shrimp, so I always thought it was like tastes like bubble wrap or something.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I like them when they're cooked in garlic and butter. Other ways, unsure.
Oh, okay. Probably depends on how they're cooked for sure.
Probably.
Yeah, that's a good point. Another pain point might be like if you're traveling or you're with family or with people you're not usually with, like friends, they may choose a restaurant or somewhere to eat that either not really a fan of or you didn't get a chance to like look at the ratings and things like that. So that can be definitely a challenge for people with emetophobia.
Yeah. And I think it's also a hard time of year because it's very reflective. So people look back on their past year, they do like yearly review, and it's very easy to be black and white when you're looking at your goals. Like if you have a goal to say, I'm going to be over emetophobia,
Yeah.
and then you say, I had an unhelpful thought, I'm not over it. This whole year was wasted. But part of the problem is when you make those goals, you don't have what that looks like to you. Like, what is it going to look like when I'm over emetophobia and things like that. So it's easy to just get down on yourself really quickly.
Yeah, and that's definitely part of the inner voice of the emitophobe that they need to keep in check, even after they go through the program for sure. Because that perfectionist thinking, black and white thinking, the self-criticism, those expectations, the shoulds, all that. It's like I should be further along. Well, no, celebrate how far you've actually come. Look at how far you've come this year. This is incredible. Even if you've taken like baby steps, turtle steps, like doesn't matter as long as you're on the right track.
Also, keeping in mind, like, it is a time of year when people have a lot of anxiety. I know you said a lot of your clients were having some blips, and that's not just for emetophobes. Like, a lot of times, financial pressures and all that stuff, people have that anxiety, and sometimes people will snap a little bit, maybe yell at someone they wouldn't normally. And it's time to give yourself some grace and realize, like, I'm doing the best considering the situation I'm in. This isn't the perfect situation where I'm doing every single thing that's helpful. Maybe I didn't have 15 minutes alone to do something that I normally do that helps with my mental health. And that's okay. Maybe I had an extra unhelpful thinking thought. That's okay because I know how to get back on track. It's not derailing everything.
Right. You didn't go back to square one because you had a wobble. I love the blip recovery program because of that, because it is very typical for emetophobes to have blips and it's completely normal and that's fine. But like you said, the statistics, I mean, the statistics that we have here, it's just like 3 out of every 5 Americans feel their mental health is negatively impacted by like the holiday seasons. That's huge. That's clearly not just emetophobia.
If you think about it, like with exercise, during the holidays, we usually aren't in the gym. The gym will be closed on Christmas, stuff like that. 3 or 4 weeks, you've lost some muscle, you might have put on a few pounds. But when you go back to working out, you still have that muscle memory. So it's the same thing with your mind. 3 to 4 weeks, you're not practicing something as much as you were on a regular basis. So you're having more unhelpful thoughts. But when you go back to it, you didn't forget all that stuff. So a lot of people go through that, but you can easily get back on trail, even if
Yeah.
it's not.
It's only when you start creating a mountain out of a molehill in your mind because of your unhelpful thinking styles that you think that you're way far off track of the track that you want to be on to meet your goals. But you're actually probably not as far as you think. So you don't need to create all that panic and self-deprecation and everything. You don't need to do all that. You just need to step a couple steps back to where you know you need to be. And one thing that some of my clients were the theme seems to be maybe an in-law or somebody in their lives that's saying things to them that they were previously external about that they're more internal now, but it's almost as if you have like that harsh inner voice outside of you when it's somebody sort of picking at you like the entire time. Like one of my clients said, her mother-in-law kept making like 3 4 different comments about like negative comments implying that she should have children and she has decided she doesn't want them right now. So,
Mhm.
that's something that you really need to just manage your thinking and just say, hey, they're over there. That's what they think. I don't need to let that impact me. I know what I think, feel, and believe. So I'm sorry that you feel that way. And you might need to actually confront too during these times because it's like a conglomeration of all these people you grew up with suddenly, like all in the same room. And sometimes that can bring about some of the old thinking styles and habits that you used to have.
Sometimes you have to sort of be introspective a little bit, and I know personally, I wouldn't ask someone about children because you don't know if someone's infertile, you don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
So you could always think like, is that something I would say to someone else? So then I'm not gonna take it to heart.
Yeah.
And a lot of times when people say stuff, it's coming from a point of their insecurity. Like, I've had people ask me if I was pregnant before, which I am not. I don't, that's not an appropriate question either,
Mhm.
because there's plenty of people that can't get pregnant or have had miscarriages or something. So it's also keeping in mind other people might be saying things to you when they're not in a good mental place.
Yes, and when you learn to thrive, you notice that. You recognize it in people's language and everything. You start going, "Oh my goodness, like that's not helpful." And you
Yeah.
just once you learn to thrive and you're freshly like out of your program, you need to keep that in mind. That's so important and so that you don't backslide into those thinking habits because you don't allow yourself like a sponge to take that into yourself. You just have to kind of protect yourself and be like, let it bounce off and be like, nope.
Yeah. I think something to keep in mind, like for emetophobia and things like that, is I'm not going to regret, like, say I want to go on a hike, but I have anxiety about it because I don't know where the toilet is. I'm not going to regret if I went on a hike and maybe didn't have the best time because at least I know I didn't like it and I tried something new. But if I decide to not do anything, that's when you'll regret it. Like when you say, I wish I had done this, people always are talking about things that they haven't done, not things that they have done.
Yeah.
They don't say, "I wish I had never gone on this vacation and experienced this new thing," and I've never heard anyone say that they regret vomiting. There's never been a person that says, "I'm looking back at my life, that made me a bad person. I can't believe I did that."
Because I think when you start avoiding things, you know, you maintain the phobia, you maintain the fear, and you just feel so external and powerless. And then you feel that sense of like fear of missing out as well and not belonging. Because if everybody's going to something like for a hike or an event, concert, and you're like, I can't go, that's going to affect you mentally.
Mhm. And even if you go and you don't have helpful thoughts the whole time or you're having a level of anxiety, you did it. You did one thing. That's a step closer to working against all those negative thinking styles instead of perpetuating them. So it's a win.
Yeah, that's interesting because it's kind of like the perfectionist that needs the A plus when they get an A and they still find a reason to beat themselves up. It's like, no, listen, if you have emetophobia, it's a debilitating thing. And if you're working towards overcoming it, every single step counts. And even if you weren't perfectly happy the entire time, like that's okay. I think emetophobes think that people that don't have emetophobia are just like happy sunshine and rainbows all the time, but it's just a matter of managing your thinking and not allowing it to go like into the red.
Yeah. And I think it's also important to realize that all the highlight reels you're seeing where people are saying, oh, this was my 2025, this was this, it's all a highlight. And there could have been nights that they were sitting alone somewhere having terrible thoughts, or there were times that they were looking in the mirror 5 times thinking about their outfit, like, picking themselves apart, but they're not gonna post that. So, sometimes, like, you have to realize that people might also be struggling.
Oh, absolutely. I think most people are, especially according to statistics.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about emetophobia in the workplace around this time of year. I know that's big for you and definitely for my clients as far as like people talking about the neurovirus and then being how do we be internal about that, whether or not we are emetophobic or we've overcome it and we're managing staying emetophobia free.
I think it's a difficult time, especially if you're in, like, a cubicle, because you can't really get up and run away when someone starts talking about it, but it is hard because, like, starting, like I said, from Halloween, if you have someone that had little kids that got together and now they're sick, usually they'll come into work and they'll be like, "Oh my god, my kid was being sick, they were doing this." Or sometimes you have someone that you're working with and they go, "Oh, I feel nauseous." or something like that. One thing to keep in mind is people are nauseous around you frequently and you're okay. Like, this isn't the first time that would have happened, and you know what to do. It's not something that you have to deal with. Just because their kid is sick doesn't mean that you have to do anything differently. And also keeping in mind, the CDC only reports cases of people being sick. They don't report cases of people being well.
Yeah.
So regardless of if there's only one case, the CDC is gonna report on it. So just because someone is in your space talking about it doesn't mean you're not safe.
So what would you say then to my client who, for example, she works in the healthcare industry and pretty much like client after client is getting sick right now and she's struggling with rumination. How would you stop the rumination when everyone's constantly talking about it?
If there are people that are aware that she's having some trouble with it, or if they're not, you could always say something like, "Oh my gosh, I keep hearing about this. How about we change the subject to something better? I don't wanna think about that anymore." Or just change the topic to be like, "Well, that sounds pretty awful because it isn't a fun time," and then just change the subject. Aside from that, I mean, I do work in healthcare as well, and there's a lot of people that are getting sick. It's not a good thing to hear, but the neurovirus is around all year round. Haven't gotten sick so far, and you know what to do. A lot of the things that people say are unhelpful, but
Yes.
you already know how to protect yourself. And if you can, try to get yourself away from that. If you find that you just keep getting stuck in a thought cycle, you can wear a hair tie or rubber band, snap it to sort of recenter yourself, take a little brisk walk, drink a cold bit of water, something like that. Just try to do anything to break that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good advice. It's like the escape and the dream technique where you need to change that track that your brain is going down. Be aware of it, detect it. Hey, I'm ruminating right now. It's kind of hard because everyone's talking about it, but I'm going to choose not to because I know that I'm just going to feel more powerless about this and create so much anxiety. And what we know is that the thinking styles lead into each other and they sort of like attach to each other. So if you have this, you might have that, and this one might feed the other one. So if you start brooding, which emetophobes are big brooders, typically,
Yeah.
like if you stop it there, then all the other ones are going to have a hard time staying alive.
Yeah. It might also be helpful if, like, maybe last week you weren't having all these rumination thoughts, to look at what's going on in your routine and what has changed. Maybe you're not doing something as much as you were, or maybe there's something else that's stressing you out that's taking that threshold down for you to tolerate all this. Because there's a lot going on this time of year.
Yeah, that's such a good point. It's like, where am I giving my power away to right now? Where am I being external because I need to grab that power back? I always think of it like you have almost like an internality battery, kind of like the self-esteem battery. And if you keep giving it out to all these different places, the weather, the news talking about neurovirus, whatever, you're not allowing yourself that power for yourself to be able to handle the situations when they actually do come.
I think that's a good one. I always think of a brick wall. Like, if you're taking bricks away to give to people, or people are taking away your bricks because you're not taking care to put all the mortar, I think it is, to hold the bricks in, then when all these unhelpful thinking styles or bad thoughts come in, there's nothing standing in the way to protect you. So you have to make sure that you're doing all those things that give you the coping skills that build up that sense of power and control every day.
Yes, yeah. And if we know that we're headed into this holiday season, and if you are going to celebrate it, if you are going to travel, you kind of have to get super thrivey first, maybe. Prepare yourself, right? Like, I know I might feel a little bit more external this time of year. How can I be proactive in my thinking about this right now? What are the things that I usually give my power away to? Is it other people's comments? Am I afraid of being judged? Whether you're suffering with emetophobia or not, it's the same types of feelings, especially with social
Mhm.
anxiety around people, during those gatherings. Like maybe you're not so much afraid of like being judged about your eating, like restriction or what you choose to eat or buying your own food, but maybe it's just like something common to people, just social anxiety in general. Like, what do I talk about? Is it okay to share this? I think a lot of stuff can just be dug up from the past too, which is a really key area domain that people give their power away to during the holiday season.
Yeah, I think it's hard because when you're back in that time, you're back in those thinking styles. Sometimes it's automatic and you need
Yeah.
to stop yourself before You let the thoughts take over.
Yeah, it's like your brain wants to go back to what it knew, sort of. So you have to know that ahead of time. Like, and that could be anything. It could be like if you lost a bunch of weight and you go back to a heavy set family and they're all overeating.